So I actually could see both these teams trying to establish the run early, having some success there, and not having to throw the hell out of the football, which could run some clock, keep the score a little bit lower here. I think I took under 48.5 in this. So I think it was at 48.5, which, again, it goes against what I'm seeing between these two teams and their offenses, and especially the Ravens' defense and their secondary and all the issues they're having. But these division games also get really, really weird, and we've seen it time and time again from these two teams specifically.
When it comes to totals, just because a team can pile up the yards does not always equate to points. I think that is something that needs to be pointed out here, because people are going to see the Ravens secondary and say, oh, well, they're terrible. We're going to see a ton of points. Lamar Jackson's going to put up a ton of points. I think Lamar Jackson can have, on paper, a decent day. But the thing is, the stat you need to look at, I think, for totals is the red zone scoring percentage. When it comes to defenses in the red zone, how do they stop teams from scoring touchdowns? Because there's a stat for that. Pittsburgh, the third best team in the NFL right now at limiting opponents to touchdowns in the red zone, because the difference between totals sometimes is a touchdown or a field goal. So Pittsburgh has the ability to kind of keep it in check when teams get in that scoring area, because obviously it's harder to have your offense work when you're not in the middle of the field. But here's where something has to give. When you have somebody who is as dynamic as Lamar Jackson is, sometimes it can be a cheat code against just about every defense. And I feel like what the Steelers did to Jaden Daniels does not mean they're going to do that to Lamar Jackson. Who do you think has the upper hand here? The Steelers defense or Lamar Jackson?
I would still go Lamar Jackson because of the season he's having, right? And it's funny you mentioned that. Remember Mike Tomlin when they were trying to compare Jaden Daniels to Lamar? He's like, hold on a second. That's Mr. Jackson over there. He's like, pump the brake, which is true. You obviously do want to say that leading up and not give any more bulletin board material, which is exactly what Mike Tomlin does. But yeah, like Lamar has continued to grow as a quarterback year after year, where now he is as accurate with his arm as he's ever been, one of the best throwers in the NFL. It's not just about his legs. And they pulled back that running a little bit there too. Lamar Jackson could win another MVP this season. It's really voter fatigue is the one thing that may actually stop him from winning another. So you can't, quarterback always is the biggest advantage in the NFL. I understand there's a million other parts on the field, but if you've got great quarterback play, you're always going to have some level of an advantage. See Kansas City Chiefs. So Steelers defense still 19th against the pass here. Lamar can carve that up too. They can get the deep ball in there. Again, it feels like an over, but it's in these matchups and still being able to run the football, I'm not taking it. But if you're talking about advantage right there alone, you can't, how can you? Lamar can do so much at any given moment in a game. How can you ever go against Lamar? We're at the point now where it's Patrick Mahomes. Never bet against Patrick Mahomes. Honestly, I feel the same way about Lamar Jackson at this point.
Well, Patrick Mahomes has a much better defense behind him. I will say that. It's not exactly fair that Lamar Jackson, the defense that's behind him is not going to stop guys like the Kansas City Chiefs do. So it's a little easier for Patrick Mahomes, which he does not need a leg up on anybody. But I think the point needs to be said. I wanted to look at the MVP odds because I think for Lamar Jackson, he's even money right now. He is plus 100. He is your favorite. Josh Allen is plus 350. I was just looking at his numbers. I do think from an MVP standpoint, you could still make a really good case from this year, just because there's been a narrative out on him for so long that the guy can't do it through the air. And people saying, well, he's great for a running back. But you look at his numbers this year, he has 24 touchdowns, I believe, to only 2 interceptions. Last year, he won MVP and he had 24 touchdowns, 7 picks, and that was for the entire season. So we're only 10 games through the year, and he already has as many passing touchdowns as he did last year, and he won the MVP. I feel like he's probably going to win it. What's standing in his way?
I was one of the few people, and I'm going to pat myself on the back for this, that didn't write off Russell Wilson and thought this was a good spot for him. I did so far over the first few games with Russell Wilson as a starter. It's absolutely looked that way. From where you were, and I can't remember when we talked about this. I know we've had conversations about this at some point when the Russell Wilson, when he was actually came over to Pittsburgh. And I can't remember. So this is literally me just trying to get gauge of where you were versus where you are now. From where Russell Wilson is now specifically with the Steelers, has he exceeded your expectations? Is it where you thought he was going to be? Because there's a lot of people like, oh my God, look at Russell Wilson. I'm like, this guy threw 40 touchdowns in a season. Like, he was a Pro Bowl quarterback for a long time, and it feels like he's settled in a much better just situation where, I don't know, he doesn't hate his coach and his coach doesn't hate him. That's a good start.
That's a very good start. He has what's interesting, and that's a very interesting phrase to use in relation to Russ and the way he's played this year, exceeded expectations. He has exceeded expectations by not trying to exceed expectations. Mm-hmm. The last 2 years in Denver, he tried to do everything, and none of it went right. When Russ is at that point in his career, like, you see him break the pocket and start to scramble a little bit, you're like, wait, this is not the same Russ. This is mid-30s Russ. And so he's not doing as much of that. He's not trying to make plays out of thin air. He's not trying to make something out of nothing more often than not. He's just staying within the system. And again, it has worked to this point. I mean, both of these quarterbacks, when it was Fields for the first 6 games and now Russell Wilson over the last 3, did a really good job of not doing stupid things with the football. And that's the key to the Arthur Smith offense. Whether it was unsuccessful in Atlanta or not because of his play calling, or when it was successful down in Tennessee, it was because they didn't ask anybody to do too much, and that's what's working for them right now.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing about like my start of the season prognostication is that I thought Justin Fields had the higher ceiling, but it's crazy to me that Russell Wilson, now with the deep ball intact, and you're adding that element to the offense, it feels like he has the higher ceiling. But I will qualify by saying this. He's only played 3 games. Do you think it's too early to have a consensus on what he is for this Steelers team?
I do, because you look at the opponents too, right? Like, nothing against Washington. That was their first legitimate test with Russ under center. I mean, we're talking about the Jets and the Giants. I mean, come on. That's why I think so many people went into that Commanders game last weekend still not sold on the Steelers, and maybe still aren't sold on them now, because it's, oh, yeah, you beat the Jets and the Giants at home in primetime. That's cute. Oh, you beat a rookie quarterback. As good as he may be, you beat a rookie quarterback. That's great. And so people still aren't sold on the on the Steelers, especially going up against a Ravens team that looks like one of the best in the AFC. So we'll find out a lot, I think, about both teams this week, in particular the Ravens defense. I mean, if Kyle Hamilton can't go, what's that secondary look like against, like we talked about, Russ and the moon balls and Pickens and Williams on the outside and maybe the tight ends getting open underneath? We're going to find out a lot about the AFC North and just how tight it may or may not be down the stretch this weekend.